Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NeoSystems webinar, Mastering User Security in Costpoint 7, another in our series of Costpoint 7 webinars. Today, we're going to take you through a very brief introduction, then get right into the changes in Costpoint 6 to Costpoint 7 with user security. Then we're going to take a deeper dive into some of the details of user security for Costpoint 7. And then the part I'm sure you're waiting for will be the demo of the user security in Costpoint 7. And then we'll do a quick review of the segregation of duties, and then discuss upgrading best practices for user security. So for those of you who are not familiar with NeoSystems, we've been around since 2000. We've been a Deltek Premier Partner since 2003. And at NeoSystems, we like to say, grow ahead. We've got your back office. We supply strategic back office services, including accounting, HR, and IT. Our IT includes hosting, including hosting for Costpoint 7. And we have consulting services that form an umbrella over all of these services. So we can provide implementation and other consulting services to help you optimize your systems and make them run the way you want them to run and the way you run your business. We have roughly 125 employees, and within our infrastructure, we're supporting over 250 clients with over 18,000 employees. We have a very robust hosting infrastructure. For those of you who might be curious, there I am amongst the NeoSystems employees, and with me today, I also have Kevin Brandt. Kevin started out as a Costpoint user, just like many of you. He has over 8 years experience with Deltek products and has completed over 75 successful implementations of Deltek products. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Couple housekeeping items here. Just wanted to go through quickly NeoSystems experience with Costpoint 7 briefly. So across our consulting team, we have many years of experience, and with those many years of experience, we've delivered hundreds of successful Costpoint implementations. We also are a user of Costpoint in our Managed Accounting Services group. Brian went through a little bit of what we do. Managed Accounting Services is actually our core business at NeoSystems. So we become an outsourced back office, basically, for our clients. And in that capacity, we're using Costpoint on a day-to-day basis, both Costpoint 6 and Costpoint 7. So we've actually been with Costpoint 7 in its testing since basically its inception. We were part of the beta program beginning in Q2 of 2010. So we've been around Costpoint 7 a long time. And with that, we've built extensive technical and functional expertise with Costpoint 7. As of right now, actually, we have 2 clients, 2 of the less than 20 total right now, clients that are live on Costpoint 7 in our Neo Cloud. So in that capacity, we're dealing with Costpoint 7 live on a day-to-day basis. Just a quick review of where we are in the lifecycle, product lifecycle of Costpoint. So Costpoint 7 is in its active support phase, so it's the current release of Costpoint. It's currently what Deltek is shipping, and that came out in April of 2012, just to recap. But more importantly, Costpoint 6.1, as you've heard from us, and if you weren't at the Deltek Users Conference, heard there, and have heard from other avenues, Costpoint 6.1 will be sunsetting and going into sustaining support mode in October of 2013. So Deltek has stated to us and others, they will be offering some extended support package for a fee. Right now we're being told that extended support package will only last for a period of around 6 months, and then it will be permanently sunsetted to sustaining support mode. Okay, so we're going to run through a quick poll just to see when everyone's going to be upgrading to Costpoint 7 in their minds.
And I see the results coming in. And one of the things as you look at this, based upon the number of registrants and attendees for this webinar, I'm beginning to think we're going to see something fairly interesting. I'm going to close the poll, and let's share the results. Looks like many of you are looking out 6 to 12 months. And with 46% of you going 6 to 12 months and 31% in the next 3 to 6 months. So very interesting results, and I thank you for sharing that with us. So let's get back on to our webinar and see if how this influences people's interest in how quickly they're going to update to Costpoint 7.
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, interesting statistics, certainly. Obviously, we're seeing a little bit of change from the webinar we delivered in June based on what people have been hearing the last several months, that it's definitely on people's radar, and it's definitely going to happen relatively soon based on the dates that are out there. So on to our main topic of the day, security. So I wanted to start with a quick caveat before I went into the security changes, Costpoint 6 versus Costpoint 7. There are a couple perspectives to look at look at security in Costpoint. You could look at it from an authentication standpoint and an authorization standpoint. So we're going to focus today on the authentication, or on the authorization side, not the authentication side. So we're not looking at authentication of the application today. We're focusing on user security within the application itself, so the authorization within the application itself. So with that said, we also have people in-house that have experience and expertise in the authentication area, so we'd be happy to take that offline with anyone who wants to hear more information on that side. So security changes is Costpoint 6 versus Costpoint 7. So the first major change is in Costpoint 6, many of you are used to using this concept of user override rights. So within a group, you could set users within that group to have specific rights to specific applications that other users within that group did not have. Costpoint 7 does not have the concept of override rights. So within Costpoint 7, rights are cumulative based on module and application rights at the group and user level. So we'll get into that in detail when we get to the demo, and we'll give you some basic rules on that as well in the detail section of this. But just keep that in mind, that they're cumulative based on the module and application rights at the group and user level. And I'll say this again, but users in Costpoint 7 can have access to multiple groups, and you can also obviously set some specific security at the user level. Next item is the result set level security. So this was not existing in Costpoint 6. As part of result set level security, you can provide read, update, insert, and delete rights related to specific result sets. In this photo on this slide, I have specifically in the customer area, and you'll see this in our demo, the access to customer address. And within customer address, you can provide specific rights to that result set. Okay. Another change in Costpoint 7. So Deltek has been very generous and provided canned user groups. So, and many canned user groups you can see in that list, in that snapshot I've provided on this slide. And these are all role-based groups. So you can see over there's the billing manager, the accounts payable manager, the accounting manager. So, and Deltek has taken this opportunity to based on their knowledge, and it's been built up over many years and many years of experience in this area, what these people would typically have access to in that role. So it's a good place to start. You don't necessarily have to start from scratch. You can start from scratch. You can build those custom groups still, and those custom groups could be ported over, which we'll talk about later, from your Costpoint 6 setup. But it's good to have the opportunity to look at these roles and then possibly customize these roles based on your specific setup. Within these roles, module rights have been established, pre-established, and also application-specific rights for certain roles. And like I said earlier, to reiterate, users can belong to more than one group in any of these canned groups, or also one of these canned groups in addition to a custom group. So some more information here. So in Costpoint 7, which is a very nice feature, is that users can only view, will only view modules and applications to which they have access. So based on your security setup, when a user logs into Costpoint, they will only see those modules and applications to which they have access. So there'll be no more leafing around, trying to find the application that they have access to. It's right there in their path, and it's the only thing visible.
So said another way, they can't see what they don't have access to, so it doesn't clutter up the screen trying to figure out why something's grayed out. Makes it just a little easier, a little cleaner.
That's exactly right, and we'll show this as part of our demo. Next, there is actually security at the process and report level. So some applications are obviously processes. Some applications in Costpoint are specifically there to run reports. So down to that level, you can say a certain person, for instance, could execute or not execute a process, but if you decide they cannot execute the process, they could potentially still see the screen. Okay. Same thing on the report side. So, and we're going to show you an example of that, of this as well when we get into the demo. But basically, within there, you can say deny or execute rights are established for specific users or user groups. Lastly, segregation of duties. This actually did exist in Costpoint 6 Web. Did not exist in Costpoint 6 Client Server. I don't believe in my experience, I didn't see it widely used. It definitely exists in Costpoint 7. Basically, the same functionality as Costpoint 6 Web. In fact, it's been around for quite some time. I did the presentation at the 2007 Insight Users Conference on the segregation of duties module when it was brand new. So I have experience with it for many years now.
Very good.
So some general information and rules around Costpoint 7 in some detail. So these are some rules that everybody on this call is going to want to keep in mind as we go through the demo. So read and follow very carefully.
Should they take notes?
You might take notes or take a snapshot of the screen, whatever, so we can refer back to it. So within the module and application rights by user and user group, again, you provide, well, there are three options: full, read-only, or deny rights. So those are the three options related to the setup. Again, rights are cumulative based on the combination of user and user group rights. So a user may have access to only one module that is not been given to its user group, but it will then have access to that module in addition to the modules that the user group has access to. And again, they can be members of many user groups. So if you've only enforced rights at the module level from a user and user group perspective, so we haven't gone down the application level here, the most permissive rights will prevail. So full and read-only. In those instances, if you have full rights to a module as a user and you have read-only rights to that module as part of your group, you will receive full rights to that module. So the most permissive rights prevail, unless deny rights are present. So deny rights prevail always. So and are always enforced first in that scenario. If we've gone down to the application level, this, first of all, overrides module rights, even if you have deny rights. So if you denied someone access to a module, but given them rights to an application within that module, they will then have rights to that application, despite the fact they've been denied rights to the module overall. If this is applied at both the user and user group level, again, the most permissive rights prevail. So that's a consistent rule with the module. So full and read-only, again, unless deny rights are present, then deny rights will prevail. Finally, the lowest level you can arrive at in Costpoint 7 security, the result set level. So these rights are enforced. If these rights are enforced, then that overrides application and module rights. Okay? So that's a key thing to remember. And again, we'll show this as we get into the demo here. So looking at this in a little more detail and with screenshots. So this is the user group setup related to the modules. So for this particular user group, they have access to the AP module. So that's what's been set up here. So this is showing it from a module perspective by group. Okay? Okay, so this is also from a group perspective, but this is at the application level. So in this view, you can see that this particular group has been given rights to all of these individual AR-related applications. Okay, so this is at the application level by group. Okay? Now from a user perspective, so now we're in the user setup. So you can see for this user, we have given rights to the AR module. So again, think of this, these rights are cumulative based on this setup that we're showing here between the user and the user group. Okay. And from an application perspective, so you can see within AR, we've given rights to the managed customers area. So in this managed customers item will be kind of a theme as we go into our demo. Okay. So why don't we mix into the demo here?
Okay.
And Brian is going to give presentation rights to me. And I'm going to log in here. Okay, so the first thing I want to show is I'm going to toggle to the user setup. And I'm going to pull up Brian as a user. Brian is going to be, as I said, my magician's assistant today as we go through this process. I need an assistant to show how all the changes I'm making are impacting someone. I'm like the
assistant or your puppet.
Either
He's
or.
going to pull the strings and
I'm like the Wizard
give
of
me
Oz.
rights, take them away.
I'm like the wizard. Okay. So here's Brian. He has been assigned to the following user groups. So and we're concentrating on company 1. So he's been assigned to 2 user groups at this point. Okay. So if we go into those user groups, so he's been assigned to all and as the accounting administrator. Okay. So if I'm looking at the all user group, I'm just going to look at the module rights here. And you can see for the all user group, Brian has access to all of these modules, basically every module within Costpoint. Okay? So that's the all user group. So the accounting administrator is right here. The accounting administrator only has rights to certain modules. Okay? And I want you to focus here and note that Brian does not have access to projects at all. He does not have access to the projects domain or any module within Costpoint or within projects. Okay? All right. So I'm going to change to Brian here and have Brian log in.
Okay.
Just to demonstrate what Brian sees currently.
So I'm logging in. And here are my modules.
So he has access to all sorts of things because of the cumulative rights of the two groups he's in. All the materials modules, he's like God.
Gonna have some fun in accounting today.
Yes. So, but as I am actually the wizard, I'm going to make sure Brian doesn't really have access to all these things. So Brian's going to change back to me. And I'm going to go in here back into my user area. I'm going to say, Brian, you don't have access to all anymore. Sorry, Brian. Okay. So Brian no longer has access to all. Show Brian again. Oops. So I'm going to move it back to Brian here. He's going to log back in.
Okay, I'm ready to log in.
And we're going to see what's happened to Brian. Oops. Looks like we're missing some domains.
Oh, what happened to people?
Yeah, so so he still has all the accounting functions that were in that accounting administrator group. He does have access to projects, and I'll show you why.
Materials, lost a few things there.
So very minimal access now, based on the fact that we took away that all group. And you can see that Brian only sees the areas that he has access to in his paths here. Okay. Okay. So Brian's going to toggle this back to me. I'm going to show you a little bit of about how Brian's user is set up. Okay, so here we are, Brian as a user. You can see again that he's been assigned to this one user group. So within his user, we've gone down to the application area to give him application-specific rights. So I've given him application-specific rights to compute revenue, which is why Brian could see a project's related path. So I've also given him some specific rights around managed customers. I said we'd be circling back to that item. Okay. So where I want to go now is show you what we've set up from a result set perspective for each of these. So in managed customers, right now I've provided Brian only read rights to customer address. Okay, so keep that in mind as Brian logs back in. So he only has read rights to customer address. Okay. From a compute revenue perspective, because this is a process, you remember there's process and report specific rights. So within the compute revenue process, I go down to this action rights area. So this is what dictates what he can do within the process itself. And within compute revenue, he has execute rights. So he has special rights to go in and compute revenue that we set here at this lowest level. Okay? And again, you can see how that's cumulative. It's taken hold in his security setup that, hey, I've overridden everything in his group and said that Brian can go in and compute revenue. Okay, so with that said, let's go back to Brian, and we'll make sure that all these things are true.
Okay, let me log back in. See what I can see. Okay, it's under accounting.
Yeah, so Brian's going to go to accounting, accounts receivable, customers, manage customers.
Shall I find
So yeah, go ahead and pull up a customer here.
Shall we pick on Erickson?
Let's do Erickson. That's perfect. So remember, Brian had read rights only to Erickson.
So I'm typing now, and I can't enter anything.
Brian is typing as fast as he can. Nothing is coming into the screen. Brian, can you circle around that your buttons up there in this window?
Sure.
So you can show that right now he only has access to toggle between table and form view.
Right, and there's nothing else.
All he can do. All he can do. Okay. Okay. So he can do nothing except for see this. Ooh. Okay, so let's scroll over to our revenue area, Brian.
Okay.
So let's go to projects. It's the only path you have.
Makes it easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brian's going to go ahead and pull up a parameter we have saved for him here.
I only have one, so one automatically comes up.
And Brian's just going to prove that he can process revenue.
Excellent.
Completed successfully. Good work. We have revenue now.
Thank you.
We're going to show net income. Okay. So why don't we decide to do something different with Brian's security? So Brian's going to toggle it back to me, and
Okay.
we're going to work specifically in this customer area. Okay. So within customer, I'm going to go into the results set again. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and give Brian update rights only to the customer address. Okay. Save this.
So now I'll be able to make updates.
You'll be able to at least modify the customer address.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to change it back to Brian and see how this has taken hold.
Okay, now I'm going to log in again because he changed my rights. I have to log out and log in order for the new rights to take effect. But I can come into accounting, accounts receivable, customers, manage customers. Let's do that query again. Go to the same customer. And now, let's see if I can do anything. I'm going to start typing. 301, 555. Click save.
So yeah, so Brian's been able to successfully update this record. But notice again, Brian still does not have access to do anything but toggle between table and form view. He doesn't have access to do anything else to this record other than update it. Okay?
Okay. Back to you.
So let's do one more thing to Brian's access here.
You're having fun with me today.
Okay. Back to Brian. In our Manage Customers area, go to our result set rights. And I'm going to go ahead and give him full rights. I'm going to go ahead and give him rights to insert and delete as well.
Good.
We trust him now with customers. Okay, so back to Brian as presenter. And we'll see if this is effectively taken hold.
Okay, I'm ready to log in. So I will log in. And let's go back again to accounts receivable, customer, manage customers. Do our query again. And before I start typing, let's highlight. See now, I have more options down here. I can delete, I can create new, I can copy.
Yeah, so all sorts of actions now Brian can perform on the customer address.
So let's try something new. Gives me a new line. Say we need to add a new shipping address. And what's their phone number? They're in the district. They have a fax number. So all these things that now I can do because Kevin gave me the rights to do them.
Good. So that was fun. We got to mess around with Brian a little bit.
Okay.
So that's the extent of our demo. I think it gives a nice overview of rights. Obviously, this is very simplistic. You're going to be able to make this, as you can see, as simple or complex as you want to make it. But the things to keep in mind are those basic rules that we talked about before we got into the demo. The most permissive rights prevail. unless deny rights are present, and that application rights override module rights, and result set rights override both application and module rights. Okay. Back to the presentation. So another polling question. Do you use security overrides? So these are the folks that are going to have pain potentially when they do this upgrade, and will probably want to take a good look at security before you implement it in Costpoint 7.
Seeing lots of results come in. And can anyone guess what the results are? Let's close the poll.
Good. So again, interesting.
About 70% of people use overrides.
About what I expected. Again, you folks that are out there that use overrides, those will not, and we'll talk about this when we get to best practices of around the upgrade of security in a little more detail, but it's not going to be something that ports over very cleanly. However, I think you can see from the rules we've given you and from the demo that there are ways to implement these overrides through the way Costpoint 7 does security versus Costpoint 6.
Okay, so they'll be able to do everything they can do today, and probably even do it better, but it won't just port over magically.
No magic here.
No magic here.
No magic here.
Despite your claims of the wizard.
The Wizard of Oz cannot do everything.
Okay.
As we learned, he was simply the man behind the wall. So let's skip into a different topic. Segregation of duties, real briefly. So again, segregation of duties, I think many of you will want to take advantage of use of this module, as you have probably not taken a client server and not had access to it all these years, regardless of whether it's been available or not. So some general information around the segregation of duties functionality. So it does what you think it would do. It allows for identification and management of segregation of duties conflicts based on your internal control structure. So based on which duties will be in conflict in your matrix of segregation of duties, you can identify those through this application. So segregation of duties conflicts are derived from your user and user group security setup. So it looks at all those at what these folks have access to from a cumulative perspective, and will report conflicts based on that. You can actually set the application to either automatically enforce the segregation of duties rules you've established, or just be a reporting mechanism and report where you have conflicts. And this is referred to as prevent versus report mode. So I've given a little snapshot here of where you would establish the setting in your corporate settings. There's this little checkbox here that says enforce segregation of duties rules. And you do have to be careful in enforcing these rules, because it does make this area functional in that, A, you will have to run the tool utility before a new user will be given rights to make sure that what you've established for them is not in conflict with any of your rules. And B, it will also modify or change existing security setup based on rules that have been added. So it is functional in that way. So again, something you have to be pretty careful with and test thoroughly before you implement it. So I would recommend most people start off in report mode, and that'll give you a majority of what you want as far as reporting on where conflicts exist. And then, test it thoroughly, and if you get comfortable enough, move to prevent mode.
Okay. Yeah, so to just repeat that, best practice is start off in report mode, because more likely than not, the first few things that report a conflict on the segregation of duties would be, it would be a mistake in your setup versus somebody making a mistake and giving somebody rights that they shouldn't. Correct.
So a couple of setup steps in the segregation of duties area. First, you've got to actually set up so there's nothing that comes canned in this area. You actually have to set up your conflict types. So in this instance, so just you're setting up your conflict types allows you the capability to categorize conflicts so you can more easily report on them. And in this scenario, the child result set displays where the individual application conflicts exist that are linked to the conflict type. So in this instance, you can see that I've set up a conflict type between AP entry and cash disbursement. And in the next screen, I'll show you actually how I have set up these conflicting applications. But you can see in this window that the managed AP voucher application is now in conflict with the approved checks and the post-cash disbursements applications. So this is actually how you set up the application conflicts, and then you actually assign it a conflict type. So within here, there has to be 2 applications. So obviously there has to be some conflict that's established. And then, and what you're doing here obviously is specifying the combinations that cause your conflicts based on your segregation of duties matrix. So here's where I've set up the fact that our people entering AP vouchers cannot go in and also approve checks and post-cash.
Okay. That's good. I think it's worth mentioning that if you're interested in the segregation of duties area, our online training class includes a section on segregation of duties.
So finally, the report. So this is the report that's run, and this is actually a result of the process that will be run in prevent mode as well. So this evaluates all of your user group and user security, user group and user security from a cumulative level, and then reports back on conflicts based on what you have set up, what I've shown you. It checks all users. So in this instance, on this report, you can see that there is a conflict out there between managed AP vouchers and approved checks and managed AP vouchers and post-cash disbursements in the user group all. Okay. So the all user group has access to both of these things, which are in conflict with your segregation of duties rules. Okay. So finally here, upgrade best practices. So I try to get to this in a little more detail, and here it is. So if your security will port over as part of the upgrade process, it can be ported over. But again, based on your complexity, if you have overrides in place, if you have multiple users, we analyze it, but it's probably going to be best practice to evaluate that and then implement security in Costpoint 7 from scratch. So, but obviously, and that's part of what NeoSystems has been doing out there is looking at folks' security setups and understanding whether or not it would make sense to actually upgrade it or not. So, but in most instances, like I said, we'll probably decide it's a best practice to implement it from scratch. But it does provide you, in that instance, a good opportunity to review your security. Perhaps you haven't looked at your security model in a long time, to review it and update it and actually take advantage of the lower levels of detail you can get into in security from a Costpoint 7 perspective. Okay. So, why NeoSystems for Costpoint 7? So a little bit of a marketing spiel here. We do right now offer hosted environments for you all to, within our Neo Cloud, for you all to bring your Costpoint 6 environment in and upgrade it while you're procuring your internal infrastructure and start your testing process. So we're offering that opportunity. Okay? So that, of course, a safe place to test and experiment with no disruption. That's that opportunity. So that's really it.
Yeah, we're going to open up for Q&A. We have a question already about the classic question, is this being recorded? Yes, and we intend to make the session available and give people a moment to see if there are any other questions out there.
Yeah, so one of the questions is, does the access for the process level security also apply to the posting screens? And that is yes. So the posting screens are a process. They are a processing screen. So yes, any screen where there's a gear, where there's a process that takes place, that yes, the process level security would take hold in those areas. So another question. So the question is, so even through though Costpoint 7 doesn't have override rights, it seems that the application-specific rights actually perform the same function, and that is a true statement. So you can get to that level of security by using the application-specific rights, but again, you have to be careful around the cumulative nature of the rights in Costpoint 7. So you have to look at what the user group has versus what you're setting up at the user level. The next question, do you have to define the segregation duties rules? Are they predefined? The answer is you have to define them. There are no predefined rules. So yeah, so all those rules are set from scratch based on your segregation of duties matrix internally. Next question is org security. Will that be a feature of systems of Costpoint 7? Yes, org security is there in its pre-existing form from Costpoint 6. So yes, you will be able to continue to use and take advantage of org security. The next item is, can the user still print preview if it's only read-only? That's something I have to review. I do believe it would be the case that you'd be able to print preview if it were only read-only, but I'll have to circle back on that question.
Okay.
So those are the questions I've been asked so far.
And we might not be able to get to all the questions today, and if we don't, we'll be sure to try to answer them online or one-on-one. And but I can move on. And
so yeah, so Brian, so we'll see all the questions here.
We'll capture them and
we'll capture them and make sure we get back to everyone that's asked a question in some way, shape, or form.
Yep. You know, one of the things I was looking at is what are the next steps from here, you might be asking. And we have the blog where we keep providing updates as we continue to help clients upgrade to Costpoint 7. We share our experiences to give everyone an idea of things that they need to be looking out for. So please check out the blog and keep yourself informed on the latest in Costpoint 7. And I mentioned earlier when we were talking about segregation of duties, we have an online class of Costpoint 7, what's changed. We cover a variety of things. This class is really targeting current Costpoint 6 users. It's a 2-3 hour class online. It has exercises that you can complete, actually work in Costpoint 7, so you get that experience that you can bring back to your organization and really understand how it works, and so that you can remember it and bring it over into your production environment. Always better to learn in a test environment than to learn in the production environment.
It's a great rule, Brian.
So as I mentioned, for what's next, we have Costpoint blog. We also have a hosting environment available now. We have clients, you can come in and just use it as a testing environment. We also have clients who are in production in our hosting environment as well. And the training class that I mentioned is on December 11th. And if you want to request the slides or the recording, please email us at growahead@neosystemscorp.com. And Kevin, do you have any parting words for us?
Well, I'll take two more questions that we've been asked here before we sign off. I think we have time for just a couple more questions.
Yes.
So one of the questions is, for the groups already predefined, can you assign more than one to a user? The answer to that is yes. You can assign multiple groups, regardless of whether they're they're predefined or custom to a user, so they can belong to multiple groups. The next question is, are there canned reports for security setup? And yes, there are. There are some canned reports in Costpoint 7 related to the user and user group security.
Okay. And still a few more questions flooding in, but we'll have to take this offline. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank Kevin. And if you have any questions for us, please email us, call us. Have a good afternoon. Thank you, everyone.